What is going on, FA Nation? My name is Justin Fensterman, along with Ryan Hallam, and it's another edition of Fantasy Alarm Sports Talk. Ryan, the Monday after, always crazy, man, and it seems like we can't get out of a week, as we tend to not do in fantasy football, without having at least one injury, my man. But how are you doing?
I'm afraid to say too much this week. In case you don't remember the end of last Monday stream, I had said how nice it was to have fantasy football and football without any of the interruptions that we had with the other sports. And no sooner than a couple of days later, the Tennessee Titans have gone COVID crazy. Cam Newton also. So after I said that, football kind of gets the hiccup that other sports have had. So I almost think I might have jinxed everything last week, but it was another fun week.
Don't blame yourself. If you're going to blame yourself for anything last week, blame yourself for eating in front of me while I had a fast for a day. That you could blame yourself for.
I Mondays are busy for me. I didn't get a lunch. I had to get it in while I can.
Yes, always like to get it in. Ryan Hallam. Same with me, Justin Fensterman, as well. Let's talk about what happened, though, when it came to week 4. Lost a couple more running backs out there. Lost Austin Eckler, Nick Chubb. For the next several weeks, it's looking like, Ryan. I mean, at this point, if we own these guys and it's just another running back blow to top running back here, how do we even attack waivers anymore? Because it's getting very thin when it comes to the position all of a sudden this early in the season.
Yeah, like last year we talked about before the season started how few injuries there were to running backs, and it looks like they're making up for it this year as, guys just go down week after week and not just, scrubs. We're talking about top guys each and every week. I think a lot of leagues added IR spots because of, COVID possible, complications. And now because of that also, the NFL's put, the IR, it can be 3 weeks, which usually was, a minimum of 8 and sometimes a season. So, we almost gifted this with fantasy football this year, that we're given an opportunity to keep these guys on our rosters, not count against our roster size, and, hopefully pick up some backups. The problem with these two is, I would say most leagues, the guys behind him are probably owned. Kareem Hunt is certainly owned in every league.
Yes, people were drafted in the 4th, 5th round. Of course it was.
And with Josh Kelly, getting those couple decent games in the beginning of the season, I think he's probably, owned in every league.
He was the week 1 leftovers from the draft where you're like, oh, why is this guy here? If you didn't grab him after week 1, you're not getting him right now.
We're talking sure very, very some good. He was probably let go of, but I'd say he's probably still rostered in 80% of leagues. So it's not like the situation where, you can just spend a bunch of fab or your number one waiver priority and pick up a backup here. You're kind of stuck.
I have to ask about this player, Ryan. I'm sorry, and get ready to roll your eyes. But from the Alliance of American Football, and we saw him, D'Ernest Johnson. I mean, I don't know if it was out of convenience or if he's going to be involved moving forward. I don't think he's a number 1 waiver claim guy, but do you really think that Kareem Hunt is going to demand all these carries, or do you think it's going to be more split and maybe he does get some consistent volume every single week?
I think he's at least worth. I don't think he's worth any waiver, unless you're last, 12th or whatever your waiver priority. I wouldn't waste a waiver claim on the guy. I wouldn't waste a lot of your fab, maybe 5%, 3%. I don't see him really getting a lot of volume. I think Kareem Hunt is going to get the vast majority. I mean, let's remember he was in Kansas City before he came to Cleveland, where he was the man. He led the NFL in rushing his rookie season. So he didn't come to, he doesn't get this split in Cleveland because he's not capable. He gets it because he went to a team that also has Nick Chubb, who's an awesome running back. Right. So yeah, I definitely think that Hunt can pull 20 carries a game while Chubb is out. I think he's going to get the vast majority, but he's not going to get them all. And he looked good, yesterday. I think again, it was also a very positive game script. I don't think anyone really thought the Browns were going to just smoke the Cowboys like that. So they ran the ball a lot, and Kareem Hunt wasn't 100% going into the game. So I think there was a few things, working in his favor that I don't know that will be working in his favor coming up. Worth a roster spot? Sure. With a number of running backs going down, you never know. You can never have enough depth at the position.
Yep. Now let me bring up someone else, and this is one of my least favorite players in fantasy football over the last couple of years, as I'm sure a lot will agree with me. Justin Jackson. This is one of those guys where you just don't know why he's even here. And I'm telling you why this goes back. Whenever I talk about Justin Jackson, it goes back to last year before the season began. And Ryan, you can tell me if I'm wrong. And I think I've brought this up with you a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't Justin Jackson the starter or looking like he was going to be the starter going into last season when Melvin Gordon was holding out and Austin Eckler was still there? Wasn't Justin Jackson going to be the starter and then he got hurt maybe a week or two before the season began? Because I think back to that and I think of where we are now and seeing Joshua Kelly get love. He's not getting love. And it doesn't even it doesn't excite me, Justin Jackson. Any opportunity I'll take. He's one of those players, though, that I just roll my eyes because I'm not excited. I don't think the skill set's there. He's had players pass him up. He's been on this team. I don't believe in Justin Jackson. What about you?
No, I give him. I was going to say I go with him a little more over to Ernest, but I think the Brown situation is a little bit better than the Charger situation. Yeah, I think a lot of people were excited about Jackson last year for two reasons. One is we didn't think Eckler could really carry a full game load, which he's kind of proven now he can. And two was his speed. He was supposed to have this breakaway speed that he was going to burst on the scene and be really good. And it did not really happen. It didn't happen at all. I mean, he was injured, and even when he wasn't, Eckler did the vast majority until Gordon came back, and then Jackson was just an afterthought. I think he has to get some play here. Kelly just can't do it all. Right. And I think that Jackson might be like a 65-35 split, maybe 70-30 split in Kelly's favor. I think his value goes way up, and Jackson becomes a fringe roster guy that you have on there in case something happens to Kelly. But he's certainly not a guy you're picking up this weekend and just plugging into your lineup for sure.
I know. 4 to 6 weeks for Eckler, we are being told regarding that. So, again, we're looking for opportunities when it comes to picking up running backs. However, it's one of those things where you can't just spend your budget. And, Ryan, people are very desperate right now. We have 0-4 players out there, and some that haven't spent, waiting on their top claim, waiting to spend their first few bucks of fab. Maybe they got outbid every single week. It certainly is possible. You got to make a move now. The problem is you can't overspend on these guys. That's the thing. And you're talking about 5 to 8%. Come on, man. Do you really think in casual leagues that's going to get it done for either Johnson or Jackson? I think it's going to command more.
But, we talked about this last week. There's a point of getting it done and a point of helping your team. I mean, if a guy's going to get 30% of the carries on a team that doesn't run the ball that well, what the hell is the sense of spending 20% for garbage?
100%. I am with you 1,000%. Spending single digits because you want to always put a claim in. Ronas talks about that a lot, and it's very important. At least put a claim in, even if it's for $1 or $2. You never know who passes through. Yeah. Seriously, you'd be surprised. It happens pretty often. But when it comes to these guys, soon to be maybe even flavor of the week guys, flavor of the next few weeks, you have to temper your expectations a little bit regarding both players. I'm with you, Ryan. I'm with you 100%. I'll put $8 down if I need the running back. However, that's different from putting $28 down on either of these guys. You just can't go crazy. And if you're really that desperate, you need to make a trade for a running back. And speaking of making trades for running backs, let me bring up two. One who turned his misfortunes around. The other one who's trending way, way down. The first one, Joe Mixon. Ryan, you and I'm not going to sit here, pound my chest and say, I'm right. But I want to use this as an example. Last week, we sat here on this exact same live stream, and we said, you have to trade for Joe Mixon right now. You have to before this Jacksonville matchup. Was it the best matchup? No. Definitely beatable. Wasn't getting targeted as much in the passing game. Thought that was going to change. It worked out. And he dominated. Now you're not getting the deal. We said this, Ryan. We said you're not getting the deal on Joe Mixon if he explodes. And he exploded. Now at this point, Ryan, and yes, he has tough matchups coming up, but now you're not getting the deal on Joe Mixon. So we shift our focus to Kenyon Drake, who looks lifeless on the ground at this point, hardly getting targeted. I mean, I've been asking people, how they're planning on selling Kenyon Drake, some people are willing to trade him for a ham sandwich. No joke. No exaggeration, Ryan. What have you seen from this guy?
Yeah, and I just am scared to go into the fantasy alarm room chat rooms tomorrow for where all the vitriol and who should I dump Drake for. But I think the thing that you said that to me that resonated the most is he's not getting targets. He was not targeted last week. He had 1 target the week before. He has 5 in 4 weeks. He had 50 catches last year between the Dolphins and the Cardinals, and he has 5 through 4 weeks. That's to me is the most concerning part. And Chase Edmonds had 5 catches. So
and he scored.
If we're only going to get rushing yards out of Drake, and Edmonds is going to start eating into the catches, which eventually will start eating into the carries because Drake's not doing anything with them either. I officially got worried about Kenyon Drake yesterday. The time and time again not being targeted in the passing game. Edmonds coming in, getting the targets and the touchdowns. I think it has to be just a matter of time before he starts to get some carries too, because we know from Chase Edmonds, although he had the one season where he was injured, when he was in the game, he was electric. The one year David Johnson got hurt, Edmonds came out and was the man. Everyone lost their minds over him. He was going to be the next big thing, and then unfortunately he got hurt.
Scored a zillion times. I remember.
Yeah, he got hurt as well, and that's when Drake ended up. But this is not looking good for Kenyon Drake at all. It's not like the Cardinals have been playing the best defenses either. They haven't really played great teams. So this is ultra concerning. The whole team is very concerning to me, outside of DeAndre Hopkins. I don't know what's going on with the Cardinals, why they're this bad, but I do still think they will turn it around. Will Drake? I'm starting to get worried. You have to think at some point he will. The offense was terrible yesterday. I think Hopkins led the team with like 41 receiving yards. Murray doesn't look like he did the first couple weeks of the season. I'm thinking it's a bad spot, and they're going to get it right. But I am very, very concerned about everyone but DeAndre Hopkins right now.
Right, and here's the thing with Hopkins even, and he showed this last year, and I'm so happy that it's coming to fruition this year because being that we had the pie bets and I had Hopkins a lot in those pie bets, I was watching a lot of Houston, and he wasn't having as much success going deep. Teams figured out how to cover him, but 10 yards here, 10 yards there, they're in the hurry-up offense. I was gaining some points at the end of games very, very frequently because of that. All of a sudden, they just figured out, let him go short. Boom, possession receiver that he's become. I feel like that's where you reach him. The problem is when you look at this Arizona team, like you said, look, Kyler Murray, he can run. Well, why give it to Drake for 2 yards, for what, under 4 yards a carry that he's averaging this year? Kyler Murray could do better. And if you want Chase Edmonds, you just mentioned how tough Chase Edmonds is. And he's getting those targets in the passing game too, which really took away my confidence from Kenyon Drake. I have one share of him. I have a decent amount of Chase Edmonds. Let me ask you this, and tell me if I'm crazy. But I feel like this is how, I know you think I'm crazy. This is how a casual player thinks. Instead of trying to figure out, with my eyes closed, trading for Kenyon Drake, if I need a running back, do I try and go a little bit cheaper and go after a Chase Edmonds, hoping that he develops more standalone value as the season continues? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you could probably get Chase Edmonds even after yesterday's game. I still think you get him for probably a mid-range wide receiver. I don't think anyone, everyone on their roster is holding Chase Edmonds with real tight. So that's not a bad idea at all.
Let me ask you this: do you think this would get it done? Tell me if you think this would get it done.
Okay.
And this is just me spitballing. Laviska Shenault for Chase Edmonds.
I think it definitely gets it done, and I don't think I would do it. It depends on your roster. Shenault is really starting to come on. He gets a little bit better every week.
Exactly.
I think that definitely gets it done, and if that came to me, I would take it.
Player that came to mind, then I said, okay, if I have enough receivers and I have Shenault, and I'm like, okay, so after Chark, it's this guy, and then you have Edmonds. I don't think that's a bad trade if you need a receiver.
It certainly isn't.
So this is a fun game. I want to just start rattling off players and tell me if you think they would get it done. That's just, here's one. And you can tell me if this is a ripoff, and maybe we should even talk about this because a team like the Jets, who you don't want anything to do with any option except for Jamison Crowder. So how do you value Crowder in trades? Because I'll say this, when it comes to Edmonds, I actually have an offer sitting there for me in one of my leagues where I desperately need a running back. This is a league that I pretty much have Chase. I lost Saquon. This is a league where I pretty much have Chase Edmonds, Jordan Howard, and crap, and that's about it. Do I trade someone like a Jamison Crowder for someone like a Mark Ingram even? Like, that's where I'm starting to value these receivers so I can maybe get a running back even if they're in a bit of a share.
I honestly think a PPR league, Crowder is a really good receiver. I mean, like you said, he's the only option they have. That offense is so bad.
Garbage.
I have lots of words in my head that I'm not going to say on this family-friendly web live stream for what the Jets' offense looks like. But if I was Crowder, I mean, I think you got to shoot higher than that.
Right.
I would, shoot after Drake with Crowder. I think that might not even be.
Wow, you really think that can get the deal done?
In a PPR league right now, with the way that Drake has looked, I mean, Crowder barely played last year, or he barely was able to play, and he still had a really good game. He's a PPR machine. I think he's a pretty valuable receiver. And as much as the Jets, running back,
I would do that. I would 100% do that. And
I think Crowder's underrated.
What's that?
I think Crowder's underrated.
Well, he got a lot of targets, and I think people thought that I almost said Braxton Berrios. Oh my God, Rashad Perriman. I thought thought that would take away from him and Chris Herndon a little bit more, but clearly we saw a not 100%. Jamison Crowder had over 100 yards last week.
He's the only thing they have.
That's it. He's the only thing they have, but you can at least trust that the floor is safe and that he's going to once again be a target monster because the Jets really don't have anyone else at this point. So, man, if I can get Kenyon Drake there, even though I'm not impressed, I would do that. Likely Crowder, my third, fourth receiver at this point, I am totally fine with doing that. But that's the problem. I felt better buying low last week on Joe Mixon than I do Kenyon Drake here. Yes. We're just not seeing anything. Now, what we have to hope when it comes to Kenyon Drake, we need him to start being targeted. 5 and 4 games. Absolutely unacceptable. You can tell me if I'm wrong on the number, but late 60s, I believe it was 68 between Miami and Arizona last year. Or rather, I'm sorry, he was targeted 68 times. Yeah. He had 50 catches. So with that, we've seen him do it before, and we're just sitting there waiting. He has to become more active in that passing game. He has to follow what the Bengals did with Joe Mixon, start throwing to him a little bit more, or even at all.
Yeah, and that's why he was getting that early second-round draft value was because of the passing game. And I don't think anyone expected him to run for 1,300 yards or 12 rushing touchdowns. I think we all expected 950 to 1,050 yards, 6 rushing touchdowns, and 50 catches. He's on pace for 20. I mean, that's a huge drop if things don't improve for them really quickly.
Really, that's not good. That's what we call not ideal. But hey, if you're 0-4, there's still time to turn your fortunes around. That's what we're all about. That's why you ride with the family. The family is always with you like a true family should be. Can't spell family without FA, fantasy alarm, if you haven't figured that out by now. Let's talk about these Monday night games because blessing in disguise, Ryan, what's better than one football game in a night?
2 football games in a night.
Dude, you're so smart. You're the smartest man alive. So with that, let's talk about some of the news and notes. No Devontae Adams. He came out earlier today and said that he wasn't going to be playing. Now, at this point, with Marquez Valdez-Scantling, with Alan Lazard out of the way, is he going to be essentially a paper bull? Do you think that he's going to let down because a lot of that focus will be on him? Is it Robert Tonyan's season? What are you expecting from this Green Bay Atlanta game?
I think Valdez-Scantling has to come through. I just don't see a scenario where he doesn't. The Falcons secondary is so bad that I think that he's got to be the man. I mean, he's not great. We've talked about his hands several times, that they're not the most reliable 2 hands in the National Football League, but he's got to be looking at a minimum of 10 targets tonight, you have to figure. They don't really have much behind him. Yeah, I think Aaron Jones is going to have a great game. I think you'll see Jamal Williams probably get more than a little bit. And yes, Robert Tonyan as well. Again, just out of sheer desperation, that I think he has to get the looks. So those 2 guys I feel good about going into tonight. Obviously, Aaron Jones as well. it's just Atlanta just hasn't proven anything. Even Jay Sternberger got into the action a little bit last week. He won't be fantasy worthy, but I mean he might get 3 or 4 catches tonight as well. I think we're going to see a lot of Aaron Jones, a lot of Marcus Valdez-Scantling, and yes, Robert Tonyan will probably have a fantasy relevant evening as well.
I'll tell you this: that if the Packers are down at halftime, might have to bet that live line. When it comes to Atlanta, or rather, when it comes to the Packers coming back to win, you know how Atlanta doesn't have that clutch factor. So that's also something to think about right there. But when it comes to this team, here's the thing with MVS. By the way, I was going to actually get on this stream with you and start asking you some player props that I saw on DraftKings Sportsbook. Probably to no surprise, I couldn't find any with MVS in the few areas that I looked. Does that surprise you at all? Or do you think everyone's going to want to take the over on whatever the props are? You can't really come up with a number.
Yeah, you would probably think, unless you made it something ridiculous, and then people would just not do it if it was something out there anyway. So it probably was very difficult.
At 39.5 receiving yards.
Yeah, I think
that's very interesting. That was the one that stood out to me.
At least 65, 70, I would think. I think 39 is a no-brainer. They've got nobody else to throw to.
That makes my shoulders shake right there, Ryan Allen. If you think he's going to double that output, I'm locking that in right now on DK Sportsbook. I love that.
Go for it. I think it's a winner.
There you go. You're a winner, Ryan Hallam. Let's talk about the other game, the game that we weren't sure was going to happen. Now it is going to happen, and that is, of course, the Chiefs and the Patriots. And regarding tonight, I mean, look, here's the thing with the Patriots, and received a lot of questions, Ryan. I mean, I'm sure you're in the chats, but Julian Edelman, a lot of questions surrounding him. Here's the thing, though. So Brian Hoyer is expected to start.
Yes.
This isn't his first rodeo with the Patriots. This is his third, not second, third stint with the team. So at this point, how are you handling some of the Patriots' weapons? I mean, Sony Michel's out. So let's just say James White and Julian Edelman.
That's really it for me as far as this game is concerned. Rex Burkhead, maybe. I always seem surprised when Rex Burkhead does well. Like,
this is a letdown spot for Rex Burkhead.
It really is, because he was so ridiculously good last week that there's no way he can repeat it again. I really like James White tonight. I think he's going to be a good guy. Like you said, Hoyer has experience with his team. Not good experience, but experience with the team. He's thrown to Edelman. He's thrown to White. I think the biggest factor is going to be the Chiefs' defense. Obviously, they're going to win this game. I don't think there's any question the Chiefs win. But let's look at last week when they beat Baltimore. It wasn't like Baltimore got the garbage time production. The Chiefs did not let up, even with a big lead. So a lot of games you're like, well, this team's going to be way behind. We'll get some garbage time. I don't know that that's the case with the Chiefs. They don't seem to just ease up towards the end of the game. They continue to play. And this Patriots offense with Brian Hoyer, I think, is going to be kind of a mess. So I think Edelman will probably get the most targets. And I really think that James White will get the second most targets. And with Michel out, he's probably going to get more carries than he would have as well. So those two guys, the only two that I really feel good about playing the Patriots tonight.
Yes, and I know some of you put a desperation bid on Rex Burkhead. But again, you're expecting him to score 3 times in this game. I'm not expecting that. I mean, can he grab a few receptions? Maybe. But that's the thing. I'm not at the point yet, and I don't think I've ever been at the point in the history of fantasy football where I've been comfy with Rex Burkhead going in as my RB2, even if I am desperate. If I'm desperate and I'm back into a corner, I get that. I understand that. I don't want to start Jordan Howard. Trust me. But besides being in that kind of situation, I mean, it's hard to trust him going in, and I need to see some form of consistency before being able to trust this guy, Ryan.
Yeah, he's pretty decent somehow with the ball in his hands if he gets into space, but he's just a big rumbling, bumbling guy. Like, I don't understand. He has nothing of what is normal with today's NFL. And we have these sleek athletes who can just run up and down the field like gazelles, and you have, Captain Caveman somehow scored 3 touchdowns last week for the Patriots. I don't know. And I just don't see it. And with White back, I think that's going to take away a lot of the receiving chances that he had last week. So I think that Burkhead is probably going to take a nice step back tonight.
Yes, and then, of course, John Impemba weighs in. He's producing the live stream with Damian Harris back into the mix as well. Causes more confusion. Since the beginning of time, it seems like we haven't been able to figure out the Patriots' run game, and this week does not make it any easier. Now, a few minutes I want to talk to you about this, Ryan. I want to get your take on this because I've received a 50-50 split when it came to any kind of reaction. So regarding this game and how late we found out about COVID when it came to the Patriots and the Chiefs game, and all of a sudden the game was in peril. We didn't know if it was going to happen. We needed more testing. It was really putting us down to the wire, unlike the Steelers-Titans game, which we had a few more days of notice to prepare. So I did this in my league, and I know others that in the industry as well that did this in their leagues. And I felt because of how last minute all of that was and how uncertain it was that the game was going to play, I allowed, and it was up to the league mates of mine, I allowed my league to essentially give a sub. And if they wanted to play a Patriots or a Chiefs player, then they could. But if before 1 p.m. Eastern they gave me their sub, then I would count that in the event the game got canceled. Now, there's room for interpretation. I had certain language written in my COVID contingency plan that considered a lot of things, Ryan. This was not one of them. I guess back then, maybe I was short-sighted. Maybe I thought, despite reading everything I could about COVID, thought that if this situation were to happen, no way the game's played in 2 days after. Maybe I was stupid for thinking that way. Maybe I didn't dot my I's or cross my T's, but I wasn't the only commissioner who tried to fight this and failed and then had to enact this rule. So I did this. I didn't get any pushback from my league, Ryan. Everyone was actually appreciative for once that I did this because I thought it was an act of fairness. But then you have others that believe because the rule wasn't set at the beginning of the season, despite the extenuating circumstance, rule wasn't set before the season. No sub should happen. No rules should be changed in season. How do you honestly feel about that? You will not hurt my feelings.
No, I kind of see both sides, but I will ultimately agree with you. I do feel that no rules should be changed mid-season in really almost in any case. But this one is very different. I think the initial reaction to everyone was that the game wasn't going to be played right until, really kickoff yesterday. I do the Sunday morning chats with Fantasy Alarm, and so many were, should I start Clyde Edwards-Helaire? Should I start Patrick Mahomes? And the difference with this is with other things is if Patrick Mahomes doesn't play, there's nobody else you can pick up like a sub. If you had Devontae Adams going to tonight, there's other wide receivers playing. You could have had a little insurance for yourself. In this case, there was no other insurance. Aaron Rodgers and Matt Ryan are owned. You weren't going to be able to figure something else out if the Chiefs didn't play tonight. So you really put yourself in a terrible situation of starting Patrick Mahomes or God knows who you picked up off the waiver wire, Dwayne Haskins or whatever. I know he had 300 yards yesterday, but he stinks. So that doesn't make any difference. So I think this gave an opportunity that you had to have. It was too much at risk to just take all of these guys out of the week, especially with the Chiefs. Everyone has.
I think it was players because people will come to you, Ryan, and be like, "Well, you could say the same thing about Steelers and Titans players," in which I argue, yeah, on one side you do have a point. On another side, we had more time to figure this out. And it sucks. It's a terrible situation. You knew what you were going into with COVID, going into playing fantasy football in 2020. So that's on you. We all warned you, the FA staff. We warned you thousands of times on thousands of streams. You have to have a contingency plan. COVID will impact this season. And when it comes to this type of specific situation, we found out 24 hours before that we weren't going to have two teams playing potentially. And I felt that as commissioner, even though I'm very traditional with how I handle it, and yes, the rule and the language of what I enacted was not written out in the rule, I felt that it was fair. I didn't get any pushback. And even people who I expected to get pushback from that didn't have a dog in the fight, didn't have a player from either team, I thought they were going to come at me, and they didn't. They understood it. They got it. It promotes fairness. And I think that's totally fine. And it's different from having a situation like Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones. They've been injured. You knew what you were going into. You've had time to prepare for this. This is a different kind of situation that was plopped down on us. And like you said, Ryan, we didn't really know until kickoff what was going to happen. So I felt that commissioners doing that was totally cool. I did it myself. I know others in the industry that did it. And for those that are hating on it, I really don't see why you're hating on it. You don't like it, that's one thing. But hating on it, calling it stupid,
Honestly, in the 2 leagues that I had that allowed subs for the Patriots and Chiefs, also did for the Steelers and Titans.
Okay.
So in me, for those leagues, for 2 of my leagues, it didn't even matter the short distance of it. It was still just, man, it really sucks you don't have Derrick Henry this week. You should be able to at least at least temporarily pick up a different player if you need to use them. I mean, I didn't enact that. One of the leagues, I really didn't have anyone in that situation. Another one, I had Ebron, but I had a tight end that I was fine using. I think I used, I don't know off the top of my head who it was, but it was somebody okay. It was somebody I at least felt comfortable about. It's a 14-team league. I'm not grabbing a sub off the waiver wire at tight end, so I just ate it. But it would have been nice if there was a situation there. So in leagues I was in, it was for both games. And I think that will continue because I doubt this is the last time we have to deal with it.
Right. And again, I like having this conversation with you, Ryan, because you've been in this industry for a very long time, as have I. And when you started, especially doing your analysis and covering fantasy sports, I mean, things were done a little bit differently. Fantasy sports was very different. So that's why I like getting your perspective on how fantasy sports has changed and whether or not you could still take things that may have been a little bit more common 10 years ago, splice them in right now to these times, and it be okay for the industry, because I happen to think people hate just to hate, and they're sticklers with the rules, which I understand. I'm very into that as well. I take a lot of pride in the leagues that I'm the commissioner of, but I just felt that this was an extenuating circumstances. We were not given enough time, and if this happens again and it's the same timetable that we've had, I will enact it again as commissioner. People don't like it, then people don't like it, and they don't have to play in my league next year. Hopefully by next year, we're out of this scenario, but you can never be too sure, Ryan. He's Ryan Hallam, Fighting Chance. I am Justin Fensterman at FenceD Sports. Fantasy Alarm family, always helping you win. Even if you're 0-4, 4-0, it doesn't matter. Maintenance, let's win those rings. It ain't over till it's over. We always dominate. No other option. We both just win.